What is it about old buildings that makes them haunted? Is it the memories contained within their ancient stones, the shadows cast by their gables and eaves? Or are there some structures in this world that stand as portals to another realm, places where the veil between worlds is so thin, the dead have an easier time coming through? From 1184 to 1539, Glastonbury Abbey was the spiritual heart of Europe. Its soaring twin towers pierce the clouds, and while it may be just a ruin today, the prayers and psalms of its 700 monks still seem to echo among its crumbling walls. Or perhaps those prayers and psalms are carried on by ghostly voices from beyond the grave, the phantom monks of Glastonbury Abbey. The year is 1664. London has been ravaged by plague and civil war, and the Great Fire has left thousands homeless. People are flocking to the countryside in search of the work and shelter. Among them is a young man named Robert Schriftsteller. He'd had enough of war and wanted something more than what life in London could offer him. So he became a novice monk at Glastonbury Abbey, or what remained of it. When the abbey was dissolved by King Henry VIII, many of the monks fled into the forest to continue their worship in secret. Some say they lived in caves, others that they hid in hollowed-out trees. But most agreed that they met secretly in a small cluster of huts near the ruins of the abbey. And it was here that Robert would meet his spiritual mentor, an old monk named Brother Thomas, who taught him all he knew about herbs and healing. Eventually, Robert took over for Thomas when he died, but he never forgot the tales Thomas told him of the glorious past of Glastonbury and the tragic events that led to its downfall. In particular, Thomas spoke of a magical cauldron said to be buried somewhere on the grounds. It had been brought to the abbey in the 12th century and used every Christmas Eve to raise the spirits of the monks with potent ale. But one Christmas Eve, someone stole it and buried it on the grounds before fleeing. The theft was never solved. But now Robert was determined to find the lost cauldron, not for any magical properties it might hold, but because he hoped its existence might help draw attention back to Glastonbury. That way, he and the other monks could live openly once again. As dusk fell on Christmas Eve 1675, Robert and 2 other monks set to work excavating a section of ground near the high altar. They had prayed for guidance and felt certain they were in the right spot. As they dug deeper and deeper, their shovels struck metal, not the iron pot they expected, but a coffin. Startled, they ran to tell the abbot, John Housted, who returned with a priest. They opened the coffin, expecting to find the bones of a monk, but inside was nothing but dirt. Some of that dirt was later found to contain traces of human ash, but no bones were ever recovered. To this day, we don't know whose remains, if any, were inside that coffin. Robert continued his search for the magic pot, and nearly a decade later, he finally hit pay dirt, literally. On Christmas Eve 1684, he discovered an iron cauldron exactly as Thomas had described. Jubilant, he called the others, and together they hauled the heavy pot out of the ground. The cheers of the monks echoed through the empty church. They were convinced that Glastonbury's fortunes were about to change, but Robert's dream of restoring the abbey's reputation would have to wait until morning. That night, a storm rolled in, howling winds and driving rain, forcing them to abandon their celebrations. And Robert returned to his cell alone. As he slept, he was awoken by the sound of chanting, low and mournful, like the cries of lost souls. Startled, he threw off his covers and crept to the door, pressing his ear against the wood. There it was again, the sound of voices raised in prayer. But no one else lived in the abbey, at least no one was supposed to. He threw open the door and raced into the night, making his way through the driving rain toward the sound. He had no idea what he expected to find, but it certainly wasn't this. Dozens of monks clad in robes of the 12th century stood gathered around a stone cross, their heads bent in prayer. For a moment, Robert simply stood and watched. Then the monks lifted their heads, their faces pale and drawn, their eyes wide and terrifying. Robert turned and fled, racing back to the safety of his room. He locked the door and hid under his bed, shivering, not from the cold, but from fear. He stayed there until morning, listening to the wind and the rain, wondering if what he'd seen was real or a figment of his imagination. When the sun came up, he got up and went to tell the others what he'd experienced. But the moment he stepped outside, he saw that the storm had passed. The sky was blue and the birds were singing. The only sign that a storm had come was the wet leaves crunching underfoot, and as he walked he noticed something strange. A mist hung over the ground, a thick fog that made it hard to see more than a few feet ahead, and as he pushed through it, he saw the monks, standing in a circle, chanting in unison. This time, Robert was prepared. He rushed forward, calling out to them, but the monks simply vanished. All he saw was the swirling mist which slowly began to dissipate, revealing the empty ground beneath. What he'd seen wasn't real. It couldn't be. Glastonbury was a ruin, abandoned for more than 300 years. There were no monks hiding in the woods. Or were there? Could the phantom monks he'd seen be the very same monks who'd lived and died here all those years ago? And if so, why had they appeared to him? In the years since Robert's death, many have reported seeing the monks of Glastonbury, not just in the Abbey, but throughout the town. Some say they can hear the sound of their chants echoing down empty streets, while others claim to have seen their spectral forms moving through the mist that often hangs over the town. One of the most compelling stories comes from writer and local historian Richard Carrington, who tells the tale of a woman who lived in a house near the ruins. One evening in the 19th century, she was writing at her desk when she heard the sound of footsteps on the stairs outside. She looked up and saw a monk in a long robe slowly walking up the stairs to her room. As he approached, she could see that his face was pale and drawn, and his eyes were vacant and staring. He climbed the stairs until he reached her door, then stopped and knocked 3 times. The woman didn't move. She sat frozen in her chair, unable to look away from the approaching specter. Then the knocking came again, louder this time, and the woman screamed. She threw herself off her chair and fled the house, not stopping until she reached the safety of her neighbor's home. When she returned the next day to collect her things, the door was wide open and the room was empty. The ghost monk was gone. These stories have led some to believe that the monks aren't just stuck in Glastonbury, but that they're reaching out to those who can hear their call. Some say they're looking for help to move on to the afterlife, or perhaps to finish the prayers they were forced to abandon all those years ago. Others believe the monks are trapped here by some dark force, doomed to wander these lands forever. But why? Was there something dark buried here all those years ago? And did Robert accidentally unearth it when he dug up the monk's grave? Could it be that the ghost stories surrounding Glastonbury are not just the result of an overactive imagination or desire to keep the Abbey's memory alive? Maybe there really is something dark lingering in the mist, waiting for those brave enough to seek it out. There are many who visit Glastonbury seeking an encounter with the supernatural. Some say they've heard the phantom monks chanting in the night. Others claim to have seen their pale, sad faces peering out from the shadows. And still, others have felt a cold hand on their shoulder, as if some unseen presence were trying to speak to them. For those who believe, the ghost monks of Glastonbury are a reminder that the veil between worlds is sometimes thin indeed. For those who don't, they're simply a part of a rich history that continues to captivate us today. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, though, one thing is for sure, the legacy of Glastonbury Abbey lives on in the stories we tell about it. And maybe that's all that matters. How do you think the phantom monks came to be trapped in Glastonbury? Let me know your theories in the comments below. Now check out The Devil's Footprints, Real or Fake, or watch this video instead.